All right, Dr. John Pierce, thanks for coming in today. Really appreciate you taking the time. You were the exact individual that I was looking for to really kick this podcast off. So thank you for coming in.
Awesome. My pleasure. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. You preface this with some questions. I went through them. I'm really interested to delve into this and tell a little bit about my story. And then we'll get into some specifics on health and nutrition and wellness overall. And maybe we'll do a little disclaimer to begin with, right?
Sure.
So as we go through this, I'm a guest on your podcast. I am not your doctor or the doctor of the people listening to this, so I'm not giving medical advice. You can go to see your own primary care provider or your own doctor for medical advice. I'm just kind of stating what I do or what I've done for my patients and some of the results, things of that nature.
Okay.
This isn't meant to diagnose anybody over the airways or treat them or anything like that. So we're just trying to have some fun and give some information.
Just have a conversation.
That's it.
Yeah, that's great. So you joined the Army. Was that right out of high school, 1986?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
18 years old?
Just turned 18.
Okay, you didn't need a parent's
August.
signature?
No, I did,
Oh,
right?
you did?
So because I should delayed entry program.
Okay.
Right? So I was 17 when I joined and turned 18 in August and off to basic training in AIT at Fort Benning, Georgia. Oh. And one of my roommates, when I was in my final station in Panama, they called it Fort Beginning, Georgia, home of the infancy, all the crying that happens there. So some infantry soldiers. So, yeah. So I did basic infantry school and then just crossed the base and did airborne school there.
And is that 2 weeks? How long is airborne school?
4.
4 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So then where were you stationed at?
Right from there, Fort Kobe, Panama.
Oh, that's
So
good.
it no
That's a good
longer
spot.
exists,
Yeah.
right? And it's was attached basically to Howard Air Force Base. So we had access to the aircraft that people always said, why would you jump out of a perfectly good aircraft? And I said, well, it was maintained by the United States government, so therefore it was not perfectly good.
Yeah, I've my background, I was a crew chief in the Air Force, and I saw some very young individuals fresh out of high school responsible for the safety of F-16s, and it was concerning at times.
A little eye-opening, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. So you did 3 years as airborne, and then when you got out in 1989, where did that path and the transition to medicine stem from?
Well, my father was a medic in World War II. So he didn't talk a lot about that, but he would share stories with me here and there. So that kind of piqued my interest. One of the things that he enlightened me to was that before he got out, they had offered to send him to medical school. And this was in the 1940s. But he had 2 daughters at home, so I had 2 sisters that I was never thought of at that time. I wasn't around. But he, had 2 daughters and a wife at home, and he didn't. If he had a fault, my father didn't look into the future. He was more present, so he was like, I got to go take care of them. So he didn't look at the benefits of maybe going to medical school and coming back as a physician and being able to take care of them. So prior to going into the military, he was a funeral embalmer. Oh. So when he went in, anatomy and physiology he knew well. And so that kind of put him in the medic field, and according to his stories, they actually had him teaching anatomy and physiology at some point in time. And then, he went overseas. He was in Italy in World War II, kind of coming up with he was attached to the 82nd, but he was not a paratrooper.
Okay.
So
you got that on him.
Yeah, right. And so, that kind of piqued my interest. And then, he passed away about, August 27th. So 2 weeks after my birthday, and about 6 weeks before my ETS date. So.
Oh, in 89.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's a lot.
Yeah. So I was blessed, and I actually had an opportunity to reach out to my battalion commander, because my battalion commander basically said, go home.
You were 21 at the time, right? Is that sound?
Just turned 22.
Wow.
Yeah. No, 21. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. And so, he said, you're going home. And it came down from the chaplain. He's like, yeah, just get your stuff together. You're going home. My company commander was like, what? He's got more time. He's staying. You can go home, and he's going to come back. And it was kind of funny because the chaplain he's looking at him. He's like, listen, we both have captain's bars. So if you think that you're going to, take a big shit on me, that's fine. Go up and tell the man upstairs because it's directly from him.
Yeah.
He's going home. And I, and so I actually, it was later, it was only like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I actually got in contact with him. I had a girlfriend at the time. Her mom was very good at finding people. And so she found me an address. I wrote him a letter just thanking him for letting me go home so early. He didn't have to do that. I could have went back. They could have extended me because Operation Just Cause was kind of, that whole thing was spinning up, I mean, our battalion mission, we actually did training missions doing, so we were prepped for this whole thing.
Especially in Panama at the time, there was a big focus down there.
I mean, we were prepping that summer, and the operation didn't take place until December. So, they could have easily extended me. And there's a little guilt that, not going to combat with the people that you were trained with and all that. But then, I look back at it now, only an idiot desires to go to war. If you're saying that, I really want, it's my opinion, right?
Yeah, and I used to have a conversation with my mentor about that exact thing, and he used to always say, in regards to like combat, he goes, if you're not good enough without it, you won't be good enough with it.
Right. And
that really resonated with me. I was like, what is it that I'm really chasing for that? Chasing the dragon.
Right. Yeah, I look at it and go, oh, I shouldn't have wanted to done that. But in the same token, you see a little footage on TV and you see some of these guys and you're like, I should be there for that protector role, right? Because I had this much more. It wasn't a lot of time in service and in the area, but it was more than what they had. So
it's kind of like I used to use the analogy: you study for a test for, let's say, a couple weeks, and you're all ready to go. You sit down in the desk, and then the teacher puts the test in front of you. Take your pen, you start writing your name, and then she takes the test away from you. It says you're done, and you're just like, oh, just let me take the test. Just let me do it. Like, nope, you're good.
Well, that was the thing, because leading up to that, you're familiar with QRF, right? The Quick Reaction Force. We would be on QRF, and it'd be like, all right, we're going.
Yeah.
And at that time, they would give us live ammo. We'd fill our magazines, and we'd sit and wait, and then they'd, down, and then it's off.
Just hurry up and wait.
And so they go, okay, we're not going. And then you had to unload all your magazines and put all the rounds back on those stripper clips.
Wait, what? You guys had to put them back on the stripper clip?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That sounds very military.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Right? And they just do that time and time again. And I look at it now and I think, there's a method to that madness. Because a lot of us at the time, we had good relations with the Panamanians and the Panamanian military until we didn't. That was a U.S. didn't have good relations, but we as soldiers, we did joint missions with them. So we developed some camaraderie. So by doing that type of stuff, it creates a disdain, a hatred, something so that now they become your enemy, right? I think there's a method to that madness. I think that's a psyops that we didn't realize. But as I sit back and look at it now, I wonder. You just wonder.
What we were doing there. Do you miss that camaraderie?
I did. Once you get out, it doesn't exist, and people kind of look back towards that, right? So, I came out and I played a little football. I was semi-pro here in Vegas.
Oh, really?
Right? And so I didn't get paid. It was called semi-pro. How, I don't know, but and then from there I went on a tryout. It was a combine, right? That was down in L.A., but it was for everybody but the NFL. So at the time there was there's a World Football League, there's Canadian football there, and actually the NFL was there. And so I did this combine, and I was 23, 24, so this is in the early 90s.
Okay.
Pulled my hamstring while I was training, and then the first thing doing in their warm-ups, I pulled my hamstring again, and I still completed it. And they were just like, because I'm running the 40, and I ran like a 5.3 with a pulled hamstring, and they're, and I'm grunting through it, and they're like, what, And actually, it was a defensive line coach from the Jets. And he came back, he goes, listen, we can't give you a real evaluation because you're injured. He goes, but I can tell that your heart's in it, that you're not going to quit. Right? He goes, so here's my card. If you want to come back next year, we'll pay for everything for you to come and do this again. Yeah, and I just, I had a little come to Jesus moment with me on the way home and was like, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
And I think to play at that level, it's got to be a burning desire, right? And I thought to myself, I am not even going to college to play ball. Yeah. And I think I'm going to just go walk on here. And literally, I haven't grown any, right? So I'm 6 foot
what
one.
What position were you?
Nose
right?
tackle. Yeah, right.
Wow.
And 6'1", and I was 250 pounds, right?
Yeah.
I'd have got chewed up and spit out. But and I started looking at it because I'm from upstate New York, and Dwight Freeney is right around my age, and he played nose at Syracuse at 250. And was just explosive as all get out. And then they moved him to outside linebacker. Yeah. And I just thought to myself, it's just not. Yeah. I don't think it's in the cards.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, let me focus on education because I think I'll get a little further with education. And that kind of brought me around to I should go to school.
Okay.
And I started going to community college here. And then, life situations happened and a friend of mine was going to fight in Australia, and he said, come to Australia with me. It was right at the beginning of the spring semester. It was my second semester, and I was like, I'll take off a semester because I'm going to be gone for 2 or 3 weeks. Dropped all those classes, went there, and then it took me, I think it was 8 years or 7 years to start that second semester again. Kind of put things off, was working in nightclubs and having fun in Vegas in my 20s. Yeah. Like you should, And I think everything, I look at life and go, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. If you can go back and change something, then you're changing everything for your future. Yeah. So I wouldn't change anything. But I look at it as like maybe I wasn't mature enough at that time. And especially making that decision, it proves that I wasn't mature enough. Or maybe I was to understand that. I don't know.
So at what age did you start studying for the MCAT and then apply to med school?
I went back to school at around 27, and I think I took the MCAT in either late 98 or early 99. Did well on it, and that's a story in and of itself. But I was fortunate enough to get into med school on my first go-around. So I applied to both allopathic and osteopathic schools. Got a handful of interviews allopathically. The one that I like to put my feather in is I got an interview at USHU's, Uniform Services Health.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. They only interview, at the time it was about 500 people, and they only took 100 people. Yeah. Or somewhere's about that. So I felt honored to get that invite to do that. I think I screwed the pooch when I went in because we're getting toured, and there was I think he was a major walking around, and I seen his Ranger tab, but I didn't see his jump wings, and I was like, "Sir, are you a leg ranger?" And he's like, pulled it up. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, because
all right, as I was. Carry on.
Yeah. And they thought, the audacity of this kid. I'm like, I'm just going to jack with somebody if I can.
I won't even waste your time interviewing. I'll just leave now.
Yeah. So obviously, I didn't get into that, and that would have been great. But I got accepted at University of the osteopathic school in Texas,
Western
TCOM.
Okay.
TCOM. I got accepted there on a conditional acceptance. Okay. And the problem there is that's a state school. Yep. There's only 10% of the students are from out of states, and I think they had 120. So they're like, about 12 people will be out of state students. And we can't tell you if you're one of the 12, but we want you to come here. Oh. I was like, I don't.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah. I was
Texas kind of has their own siloed medical school system, don't they?
Yeah, if you're taking state aid, they want to take care of people from Texas, which I get. And I appreciate that. But and then I interviewed at where I ended up going to school, Comp in Pomona, California. One of my now friends, colleagues, mentors wrote my letter, a recommendation for that school, and I tell him it was like Wonka's golden ticket, right? Yeah. So, they called me, would you like to come for an interview? I was like, yeah, when? Like, could you come this week? I'm in my car now.
Yeah, I'm actually on my way. I'm here. I've been sitting outside waiting.
100%. Yeah. And he's like, no, you earned it. You got this and that. But he's so well respected, and I just think that
was he faculty there?
No, he was an alumni. He graduated, some years before. His story is super interesting too. Similar background. He was former FBI.
Oh, okay.
And he was I think L.A. County sheriff. And then he went into the FBI. Then he went to med school, and he was in his 40s when he went. Right. So
he's the father of the class.
Yeah. And just revered here in town, well known. Dr. Dale Carrison. He was, I think he was chief of staff at UMC for a while.
Oh, really?
ER guy, superhuman being. He was part of the reason that I was able to and wanted to move in to do the tactical medicine with LVMPD S.W.A.T. He was kind of running that program. He was also the medical director for the whole department. And then, I kind of filled in his shoes a little bit, which are huge shoes. I don't want to say I filled his shoes. I took a toe piece.
Yeah.
But,
so did you practice with him? As for emergency medicine?
I trained with him, so I did my training. We didn't have emergency medicine residency program here in Las Vegas when I went through. I think it was a year or two after I graduated, they started one. So our program, we got to come up here and do a little bit of stuff at the trauma center. Okay. So I trained with him there. And as a medical student, I came up here and did stuff around him.
Okay.
And I volunteered the crap. Before I went to medical school, I was volunteering down there, tried to be around.
Yeah.
Because UMC, our trauma center, I think is par excellence. And
really?
The physician, it's just really top notch. And I just enjoyed being around that. And that kind of drew me more into emergency medicine.
Okay. How many years did you practice emergency medicine before you started your own clinic?
So I started my emergency medicine residency in 2003. It was a 4-year program, so I got out in 2007. I was moonlighting in the ER my senior year, and, so basically 2006. I basically, up until 2010, I had started that, I started working in my current clinic, kind of moonlighting one day a month. The cosmetic surgeon who owned it was a friend of mine from the gym, another mentor and friend, and kind of guided me through my undergrad a little bit. I remember when I said, all right, I'm going to go to medical school. I said, I'm proving to myself that I can do this, so I'm going to take biology with a lab, physics with a lab. What else was it?
Organic chemistry?
No, not that. You had to have, it was chemistry, just chemistry with a lab, and then calculus. 16 credit hours, 3 labs. And he goes, all right, if you get all A's, you can handle med school. And I got all A's except in calculus. I bombed the final and got a B. And he's like, yeah, you'll never use that again. You're okay. And, so he kind of gave me the confidence to kind of drive through and kind of complete, all the things you needed to get into med school and do the MCATs and all that fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which you're finished with all that stuff, right?
Yeah, so the MCAT was horrible.
It's changed. It's changed a lot from what it was, from my understanding. So,
it's on a computer now. I don't think it was on a computer when you took it.
No, it was not. It was.
But yeah, that day was horrible. I think just the prep leading up to it too, because you're just constantly thinking about it and just stress like, hey, I should be studying instead of doing this. Should be studying. But once you get it out of the way, and I got a decent score, not a great score, but
then the scoring changed too.
Yeah, because it was
45
like
was the max.
digits when you took it.
Yeah, 15 for all 3 parts.
Yeah, Yeah, now it's 528 is the max you can get. I did not get that.
Yeah, I think I scored a 31 or 32, which was pretty good, pretty damn good.
Competitive,
throw that into today's numbers, you're like, oh, he signed his name correctly.
Yeah, it's very competitive nowadays.
Yeah,
but so you opened up your own practice.
So that cosmetic surgeon, I come in there and we haven't changed the name. It's been Ageless Forever. So he started in '89.
Okay.
And then, so then he had it for, or was it '98? I might be a little dyslexic.
Sure.
I can't,
Yeah.
because I wasn't in medicine at that time. No, it was '98 for sure.
Okay.
So he started at '98. And then, I didn't come into it for another 8 years, right? But it was a hobby for him. So he made his money doing cosmetic surgery. And so he had somebody working at a naturopath, which, was just kind of helping him out. He had to sign all the scripts and basically told me, listen, when you get done with residency, if you want this, I'll give you a year to make a decision. And you either want it, it's yours. If you don't, I'm closing the practice.
Yeah.
Because it was costing him money. So I moonlight for that year from 2006 to 2007. And so my clock was going to start when I graduated. And I told him the day I graduated, I'll take the practice. And he's like, okay, it's yours. Because I had already changed a few things in the practice. And instead of it losing money every month, he was losing, about $500 a month. So that's what happens with hobbies. They cost you.
Yeah.
Right? And I turned it into, I made him about $100,000 in that next year by just negotiating with labs and doing things. And so then I took it over and then, I just started building upon it from there. So it was already in play and we had a few hundred patients and now it's my bread and butter. I have over 1,000 patients and we continue to grow. And, I was just looking back with my office manager, and we were looking back just prior to the pandemic and what we were making every month, the numbers that we were hitting, and compared to what we're doing today, and it's almost a third.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we've tripled in size.
Wow.
And it was just the value of the dollar. So that plays a role. So maybe say that we've maybe a little bit more than doubled if you took out inflation, but it's still pretty impressive. So
you guys have talked about focusing on preventative medicine instead of disease-oriented medicine.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, when I did emergency medicine, people are in there generally because of bad choices.
Yeah.
Either acutely or chronically, right? And for a lot of those folks, I'd look at and go, man, you could have a completely different outcome if you just ate a little bit better or what have you, right? So, and I couldn't offer those solutions to them then because there's protocols that you have to follow and, I got to take care of you now, right? But it was so often people would come in, and I'll just use an example of a heart attack. And, you look at them and they're grossly overweight, they smoke, they're sedentary, they're pre-diabetic, if not diabetic, and they're wondering why they're having this. And it's like, no surprise. And they said, well, fix me. And that's, that was almost a demand. And I would tell them, some would take it the right way and others wouldn't. I'd say, I'm here to keep you alive today. You have to fix you.
Yeah.
I'll do everything I can to prevent you from dying on my watch.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow that. I'll fight like hell for you. But when we're done, you have to fix you.
Yeah.
And some people would be pissed because I told them they had to be accountable for their decisions.
To
They're
pump themselves
no, I can do whatever I want, and then you just come in here and make me better.
Yeah.
It's like I can drive my car into the dirt and I take it to the mechanic and you just make it better.
It's like a quote from The Office. He's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't pump Stanley full of butter for 20 years and force him not to exercise." The people do it to themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so where'd I meet you? In the gym. So right, that's what I do. It's what you do, and we eat well. Your whole premise is based off of health and wellness, just as mine is.
Yeah.
You walk the walk.
Yeah.
And people are like, how do you do what you? I have to walk the walk, and it's not that I have to. This is my lifestyle.
Yeah.
This was a part of what I was going to do.
Yep.
When I was competing in powerlifting in my 20s, I would talk about, maybe I'll be a doctor. I'm going to be an endocrinologist, but I'll be, 400 pound and 10% body fat or less, because I want to, because I'm just going to take human pituitary and just eat it, or whatever. Because, I had this fantasy. I had no idea of what, it was kind of a joke. But I think it was a premonition as well. Yeah. No, I'm nowhere near 400 pounds and full, close to 10%, but it's changed.
It definitely has, and I've also seen you guys introduce a number of like peptides, and since you brought that up, we can get into those things. So,
yeah.
Sermorelin Plus.
Okay. So Sermorelin is GHRH. So it's growth hormone releasing hormone. My experience with it initially was because it's primarily used in growth hormone stimulation testing. So you drop blood sugars with either glucagon or insulin or something. And when you have that very low blood sugar state, that stimulates the pituitary gland to release growth hormone. And now you use Sermorelin with that, and it super stimulates it. And it kind of gives you an indication of somebody if they have growth hormone deficiency or not. And that was my experience with it. And then it started coming out, well, we can use this to stimulate growth hormone production if used, long term. And I would see an initial bump in growth hormone in IGF-1 levels. Let me be more specific, because that's what we use to test growth hormone efficacy. So you don't test growth hormone levels because they're in and out of the system very quick, 20-minute half-life, quick like a bunny.
Very quick.
IGF-1 level has about a 24-hour half-life, so it's about 20-hour half-life. But regardless, if you have a high IGF-1 level, with the beginning of your sleep, and that happens to be midnight, we got until 8 o'clock the next night to test and have an idea of where your levels are at. And so using IGF-1 is a very good indirect indicator for growth hormone status, unless you have some inability to produce IGF-1, which is rare, but I have seen that as well. So I would initially see IGF-1 levels come up, and then all of a sudden, after 3-4 months, plummet, and nothing changed. And so I'd seen it enough, and I think this is a short-term thing. I hadn't seen long-term usage. So I don't know, and I just be honest, I don't know what Sermorelin Plus is. I just talk about Sermorelin. So I don't know if they've figured out a way to make the peptide more effective. But I know that there are some people that develop a resistance to it after a relative short period of time. That's in the literature.
For the average person listening who has heard peptides and hormones, all these other slang terms that is around like the designer health industry, how would you describe what a peptide is?
Well, there's actually definitions for it. There's different types of peptides, right? But in the overall picture, it's a messaging molecule of 50 amino acids or less that the body normally produces, and then we're able to find these and kind of condense them and strengthen them, and then dose them to get a preferred response. So there's a ton of different peptides. So people ask me, I want to know more about peptide therapy. What can I want peptides. I go, well, that's like coming to me with a dictionary and saying, I want words. What are you trying to say? Right? So what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And then from there, we can start looking at, a program that we can potentially implement to get you from point A to point B.
What biomarkers do you guys look at to implement, like Sermorelin or
IGF-1, right? That would be the main one to look at. So if that's low, that would be something that you can use it, or a plethora of other peptides, or a combination of different peptides to try to improve that level. Now the teachings, when I took one of the first courses in the certification courses from American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine in peptide therapy, and it kind of, especially when it comes to the growth hormone secretagogues, they were like, well, some of them improve IGF-1 levels and others don't, and that's kind of preferable. I said, well, then how's that improving growth hormone? Because we know that if you improve growth hormone, IGF-1 levels go up in proportion. Well, it just doesn't, and treat the patient, because the patient feels better, then it's working. I said, it's called placebo effect. Right? So I don't have just in my own experience, I have relatively low confidence in a lot of these growth hormone secretagogues. There's one that I do like, and it's really not a peptide, and that's MK677. A lot of people call it a peptide, but it's not. It does bind to a ghrelin receptor, which then stimulates the release of growth hormone. And I typically see a very robust response in IGF-1 levels. So now I have confidence, because for me, I want to see the data that feeds back objective data, not just subjective data. So again, placebo effect, people might think they feel a whole hell of a lot better, which is great, but if I don't have objective data, then that changes things.
Okay.
Right? The downside to MK677 is because it binds to a ghrelin receptor, it also upregulates hunger.
Yeah.
And so for some people, and I'm one of them, I can't take it because I can't find the bottom.
Could you get some semaglutide in there?
Well, you probably could, right? Right. So that kind of balances it out. You use semaglutide or tirzepatide or something. Yeah. So
I got to imagine you guys have been prescribing a lot of that lately.
A decent amount, but I don't throw it at everybody.
Sure.
And then I put parameters around it a little bit. So I strongly encourage them to work with our nutrition consultant. So I have somebody in the office, and then she and I have worked together to she does the nutrition part, but then we put together a supplement program to go along with it. Those medications are amazing and can be used in a lot of different scenarios. You can microdose them and really work on autoimmune diseases and inflammation. They work great to reduce inflammation.
People talk about when they get off Ozempic or they get off Wegovy, they tend to gain the weight back.
Well, it's because they didn't learn anything from it. No, seriously.
I think that's a great point.
Right? It's a tool like any other tool.
Yeah.
And if you rely upon that one tool, that can be problematic, right? My thought, and I think the thought behind this was, listen, most people that are overweight or diabetic have a tendency to overeat. And because of the mechanism of action of this medication, there's a few mechanisms, right? But one of them to help with the overeating part is it slows down peristalsis or gut motility.
Okay.
So the food that you eat stays in the digestive tract longer. This is, right? So you don't have to eat as frequently or as much. The other side of that, though, is that the food that you eat, because it's in the GI tract longer, it's also in the small intestine where the absorption takes place a lot longer. So you absorb a lot more of the nutrients of the food, right? Because everything, when we look at calories, this piece of food, whatever it is, has X amount of calories. That's considering a normal rate of digestion. If you're sick, and we've all been sick to where we've had diarrhea, and we eat something and it seems like it comes right out the other end undigested. That's because it was undigested, because it didn't stay in the tract long enough to get fully absorbed, right? So think about that. Now, if you slow it down, you're absorbing more. So I would tell patients, listen, I have a good friend, got him on this, and he was like, well, I'm not eating a whole pizza and not drinking a whole 6-pack of Coke. I'm only eating a quarter of a pizza and drinking 2 Cokes. I'm like, yes, you're still eating crap. And so you're absorbing more crap. Stop it. So, and he didn't want to listen, and he got I wouldn't even say moderate results, I said mild results from this, right? Then I finally convinced him to work with my nutrition gal. And I can show you, he sends me pictures, and because he was at 340 pounds, he's now under 230 in a year because he started eating appropriately. Now, he still goes out and enjoys himself, but he's like, if I'm going to do that, I only eat one meal that day and that's it. I'm done, right? But once he learned, the quality of food that you put in the system makes a world of difference and you absorb more of it. And I kind of tuned into that because I follow the labs in patients and I would see like they haven't changed their vitamin D, but their levels way high, their thyroid, all of the hormones I'd put them on, everything's improving. And I thought, oh shit, that's because they're absorbing more of it. Yeah. Right? So I could titrate doses and stuff. But back to the main question, it's intended to teach people to eat a smaller amount of food, right? The other mechanism of action is because I have a theory, and there's probably science to validate this, but I think people that have a tendency to overeat have an imbalance of their gut hormones. More ghrelin, hunger, less leptin. So they already started at an imbalance, and now this medication balances them or tilts it to more satiation. So ghrelin makes you hungry, leptin says you're full or satiated, right? And so they kind of start off either at a balance of a normal person or a little bit in the satiated side, so they don't feel hungry. And that's important because I've got a handful, even smaller than a handful of patients that had gastric bypass surgery and failed it. So they had surgery to shrink their stomach, and they were miserable because it did not address the hormone response. So they could only eat so much food, but they were hungry. Mm-hmm. Just imagine walking around hungry all the time.
Sounds miserable.
Right.
You don't have to worry about that with me.
But you see what I'm saying? I mean, like, if you're hungry, just hungry, and you don't get satiated.
That's all you can think about.
That's it. And so that now they'll go through the pain of stretching that stomach out and that miserable feeling until they get that taken care of. Putting them on a GLP-1 agonist, they're comfortable. They're no longer hungry. So now that small amount of food is sufficient for them. Mm. And so it's changed it. So now for those people, they might need long-term usage of GLP-1, right, versus a short-term.
You talked about the decreased motility of the small intestine. Mm-hmm. When you do get off one of these GLP-1, how long does it take typically to come back?
I don't know. Just to be honest, I would think in short order, because that's why you have to dose it once a week, right? So it's going to be out of your system in a couple weeks.
Is that why some people talk about having gut discomfort when they're on GLP-1?
Most often it is just nausea.
Okay.
Right?
What causes that?
It's the GLP-1. And so that's why S.W.A.T came out, because the second peptide with it is there to help with nausea.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that's why it's effective. Now there's a new one coming out with 3 peptides. One is a GLP-1, one's to decrease nausea, and the other one's to I don't know. Right? Okay. So because it's not available yet here in the U.S. to my knowledge.
I need you to help me out with some myth busting. So I've read some research about GLP-1, and they have shown an association of decreased lean body mass. Mm-hmm. My theory behind this is that you have a larger portion of individuals who are female who are taking GLP-1 inhibitors, and typically females don't eat the same amount of protein that males do. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that is a correlation? And are people not eating the adequate amount of protein while they're on GLP-1 to maintain the proper lean body mass?
You're partially right.
Okay.
What you're also forgetting is, how do you put on skeletal muscle?
Resistance training.
100%, right? So you have a population that is obese. And I don't want to say by definition, because that's unfair. But most of them aren't in the gym working out. Mm-hmm. So they haven't developed that habit. Exercise to them is going for a walk, and God bless, they do something, right? Yeah. It's better than nothing. Yeah. But that's why I have them work with my nutrition consultant, because we stress resistance training. If you do resistance training and we focus on protein, and you focus on protein, and then you get your other nutrients in, you don't lose lean muscle mass. And I have patient after patient after patient. We do body composition analysis, and we show fat loss and no loss in lean muscle mass. And in a lot of these patients, we show an improvement in lean muscle mass because they had never really worked out. And so now you're stimulating their body to do something. And then if that patient happens to be somebody that we also just started on hormone replacement, or somebody to improve their hormones, now they're more anabolic. Right? So we're changing their lifestyle, and that's the key to the use of these medications. Change your lifestyle, because you don't want to just use this as, I'm just going to eat less crap, still not move, do all the things but a little less of it that got you there in the first place. We want to embrace a positive, healthy lifestyle change and modification. So this is a tool to augment that. Especially, you get somebody who's 100, 200 pounds overweight. Just typical diet and exercise, when they're losing a couple pounds here and there. I mean, if you're 200 pounds overweight and you lose 2 pounds a week, that's 1%. Yeah. Right? You can't see it, you can't feel it. Now, what if, because this is one of the tools of body composition analysis, what if we have them perfectly dialed in my idea of what's perfect, and they're trading a pound of fat for a pound of muscle?
That'd be great.
Right. What does the scale do?
Doesn't change at all.
100%. So now they're looking at the scale going, this isn't working, because we focus on the scale. And then you show them and you go, look, you've gained 10 pounds of muscle but lost 10 pounds of fat. Now look at your body fat percentage. Now they can be encouraged, right?
You talked about introducing hormone replacement therapy. That's growing in popularity. When people come into your clinic and say, hey, I want to be on test, I feel lethargic, I feel blah, 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 blah. 2 questions. What biomarkers are you going to be looking for and prior to that? And then also, what sorts of recommendations do you make for individuals before you introduce exogenous hormones?
Okay. So just depends if we're talking about males or females.
Let's talk about males first.
All right. So talk about males. I am looking at luteinizing hormone, total and free testosterone. Then I look at their DHEA levels, pregnenolone levels, and then the breakdown of the testosterone, estradiol, dihydrotestosterone. Okay. Kind of look at this overall picture. Also, in a perfect world, I also want to look at, are they insulin resistant? Do they have, prediabetes or diabetes? Something along those lines, because that's going to play a role as well. But you kind of got to look at this whole picture, right? So age also plays a role, right? So recommendation I'm going to make for a 30-year-old is a whole hell of a lot different than the recommendation I'm going to make for somebody 20 years their senior at 50, right? All things being equal.
Let's say myself, I walk in, I'm 30 years old, and I come in with garbage test levels.
Okay.
And let's say luteinizing hormone levels are average.
Okay.
What would you suggest?
Well, we have to kind of look and see what's going on, right? Sure. So it's great because when you asked that, I pulled this up because it was just like easy, right? Somebody, right? But it's like make sure the body weight is healthy, right? Encourage resistance training because we know that high-intensity resistance training improves testosterone levels. Want to make sure that your blood sugars are good, right? And that so when I look at blood sugar, and not only do I look at the blood sugar, but I also look at the fasting insulin because I can plug that into something called the homeostatic model assessment for insulin resistance. And I plug those in, it gives me a score. And so you could have a normal fasting insulin and glucose, but have insulin resistance, which is telling me you're not doing insulin or resistance training sufficiently for you.
How would you define sufficient resistance training? In order to meet, let's say, the threshold of improving testosterone, what does that resistance training look like?
Well, I mean, everybody's different, right? But for most people, it's just they don't train the large muscle groups enough. And we see enough of that in the gym. They look at
sitting on the machine, reading the newspaper, looking at the talent walking in and out.
Yeah, that's it. But you go in the gym and you don't see people in general. I mean, you see it enough, but too many people skip leg day, shall we say? Right?
Especially at Lifetime in Sermorelin.
Yeah, right. So
that's a little shot across the bow there.
Right. You understand what I'm saying? No. Yeah. So when you train with intensity, and it's hard to define that intensity, but when you're doing it.
Yep.
Right, and it isn't just doing a couple sets of curls.
Yeah, you really feel like you're taxing the nervous system when you train those big leg groups.
Yeah.
Deadlifts, heavy squats, even a good bench press too. Like you're really.
Yeah, you can. If you got a bad back, you can use like the belt squat machine that we have.
Oh, that's great.
Or leg press. You can grab some dumbbells and kind of do some one of those Bulgarian split squats. There's a lot of different things that you can do. But if you train those bigger muscles, right? Without training the skeletal muscle, you're going to have a down regulation of the insulin receptors, right? So by stimulating the skeletal muscle, that upregulates the insulin receptors. The more receptors there are, the more places for the insulin to go, and therefore you reverse insulin resistance. That's the whole concept of it.
Okay.
So an analogy I have is like we live in a desert. Plants are trying to propagate here. They don't do it when there's no rain. So in a dry season per se, right, we don't have a lot of pollen in the air. So the plants are just existing or dying or doing whatever they're doing, right? When it rains, the plants start to bloom and start spitting out their pollen. That analogy is to the plants. When you're not training, is like it's not raining, so you got nothing going on with the insulin receptors. When you train, then all those insulin receptors start to pop out and bloom like when the rain comes here in the desert, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what allows everything to start working appropriately.
So we talked about male hormone replacement therapy. What would be your typical client for females who are looking for hormone replacement therapy?
A lot of women come in circa about 40, I would say, plus or minus.
Sure.
And they're going through something called perimenopause. And perimenopause, as it was taught to me by one of the main teachers I go listen to is he calls it no man's land. No man wants to be around it. No man wants to treat it. No, it's a very difficult time for women because they're still ovulating, but their hormones are in an imbalanced state. There's a progesterone to estradiol ratio. There's a numeric thing for it, but I don't look at it numerically. I look at it more symptomatically. And so when you look at, because those numbers are going to fluctuate depending on when you test them. So it's hard to just plug them in and go, oh, but symptomatically you can tell when they have an imbalance between progesterone and estradiol. And that's where we start to implement some hormones to kind of balance that out. Typically they'll say, I'm not sleeping, I'm gaining body fat, I'm anxious, those types of things. That gives us an indication of an imbalance between progesterone and estradiol. A lot of people call it estradiol or estrogen dominance. I don't like the term because then it suggests to fix it, you have to lower the estrogen. We want estrogen. It's hugely important for both men and women, 100%. So I call it progesterone insufficiency. Okay. It's just the semantics, but when you call something an insufficiency, giving more of it fixes the issue. And so we give a little progesterone. In some women, we give a little testosterone and or anabolic precursor like DHEA and allow their body to have the material to build from there. So you kind of give it the precursors, let it do its job.
What are some common misconceptions people have about hormone replacement therapy?
Again, for men or women, because it really makes a difference, right? So it's funny because it's still relatively prevalent out there. I've had patients say, well, my doctor says, and my doctor's an oncologist or a urologist, that taking testosterone encourages the formation of prostate cancer. And I'm like, every single study in the last 15 years says it doesn't. Well, I actually have prostate cancer, and my doctor says that if I take testosterone, it's like pouring gasoline on the fire. Great. I'm a little bit afraid for because you have a board-certified urologist that doesn't appear to be reading the literature, because the literature actually shows that giving testosterone to somebody who has prostate cancer does not increase the rate of growth or change their diagnosis. That can happen, but it has nothing to do with the testosterone. Well, okay, then listen to your doctor. Don't take testosterone, and then you can suffer all of the indignities that come with low testosterone levels, like bone mineral density, so weaker bones, increased risk for heart disease because of the resistance, insulin resistance associated with low testosterone levels. Low testosterone, to begin with, is associated with the more aggressive forms of prostate cancer. So, the list goes on and on. Mood, increased anxiety, depression, I don't want any of that stuff. No. But if your doctor's telling you shouldn't take it, then you should listen to them, right?
It sounds like those misconceptions are also applicable to females as well.
Well, I mean, it's been said. I mean, I was just getting into medicine in my internship year around 2003 when the findings of the Women's Health Initiative came out, and they said, oh, if you give hormones, you're increasing women's risk of breast cancer, heart disease, and stroke. Bullshit. Read the literature. And that was a problem. Too many physicians are too busy doing whatever they're doing, and they don't read the literature themselves. They get it from the news source, just like the common population does. So we had newspapers and magazines and news organizations telling us what the study said, and instead of physicians grabbing that and reading it themselves, they believed it. And so they were like, oh, we got to stop this because we took an oath, first do no harm. And if I give these hormones, it's going to increase the risk of breast cancer or heart disease or stroke. And the results of the study were misrepresented, right? So we've seen an increased risk of heart disease and stroke in women who were 10 years postmenopausal when you gave them the hormone, right? And there's a reason for that. Because one of the things that estradiol does is it helps to prevent the plaque buildup in the coronary arteries or in other vasculature. Because it upregulates a protein that is like Miss Pac-Man. And so when you start to get little cholesterol deposits from inflammation in the blood vessels, it goes through and eats them up. When they're small, it's not a problem. When you start to go into menopause and your estradiol levels go down, now Miss Pac-Man's no longer there. You start to develop these plaques, and they get bigger and bigger, right? And just like in Pac-Man, when you reintroduce the hormone and that plaque's bigger, that dot's bigger, what happens when Miss Pac-Man eats the dot? Well, the ghosts change, right? And, now she can go eat the ghost. Well, in this case, when the ghost change, it's you becoming the ghost potentially. Because when that protein goes there to down-regulate or to decrease the size of that plaque, it's doing that in a protective manner, but what's happened is in the middle of that plaque, it's developed a necrotic core. Once it hits that, it ruptures the plaque, and now you have your heart attack or stroke. So in that population, 10 years postmenopausal and unhealthy, yes, increased risk for heart attack and stroke. So it's really showed us that timing makes a difference. So the sooner you get someone started on hormones, the better off it is, and you protect them from those things.
Let's say somebody has a resistance to taking that step of introducing exogenous hormones. Are there supplements that people can take orally that can help?
A female?
Yeah, let's start with females.
No.
Nothing.
No, because there's no supplement that's going to replace estradiol. There's no supplement that's going to replace progesterone. You can give the precursors, but the organ itself that produces it is retired, the ovaries. Once that egg supply goes, the production of estradiol pretty much goes down. It's all based off of, now you can get some aromatization of testosterone, but the testosterone levels are generally diminished because most of the testosterone comes from the ovaries, and a little bit will come from the adrenals.
How about men when it comes to testosterone? Supplement intervention.
So, again, really depends on the picture.
Sure.
So if you have primary gonadal insufficiency, which means that your luteinizing hormone is really high.
Yeah.
15. So the normal range is like 0.5 to 9.5.
Okay.
Roughly, right? Way outside that range. So that's telling me that the brain is screaming at the testicles to go to work and they're just not responsive. Probably not much you're going to do in that scenario. You have to probably just give the hormone, right? Now, if that level's normal or low normal and the testosterone level's low, you can start looking at other things. Resistance training will help. Make sure if they're insulin resistant or, pre-diabetic, reverse that. That will help. Sleep absolutely helps, right? I pulled this up because there's, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything, right? Alcohol, tobacco.
Yeah.
One of the things that this mentioned, and you go, oh yeah, it makes sense. But the xenoestrogens that are in everything because of plastics, this is one of the reasons I think that why we're seeing the levels of testosterone decline. I mean, the normal level of testosterone when I started this was, that was 250 to 1100.
Okay.
And now they take the upper end and they keep lowering it. Now it's like 850 in the normal lab panel. So if you're at 1100, it's too high. I'm like, well, it's because they make these lab panels off of the averages that they're finding. So if the average keeps declining, then the average level will keep declining as well.
Then insurance won't have to pay for it because it's still within the acceptable limits.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's, to me, I hate to use them as an example, but, everybody thinks of Harvard as like the, bastion of education. So if the American population is getting dumber and dumber, do they lower their admission scores?
No, I hope not. But especially with medical school too.
They are, right? Because of other reasons, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen this in the military.
Yep.
Right. I know I've listened to some people who've been in and out and then back in, and I listened just. It was a great podcast with Sean Ryan. I don't know if you listen to Sean at all. He did the podcast with Tonto, Chris.
Oh, sure.
Right, from 13 Hours.
Yep, Benghazi.
Right, Benghazi. He went in a few years after I did, in the early 90s, I think it was initially, and went through his progressions and then got out for a period of time. And he went to go back in. They're like, you got to start from the beginning. And they sent him back to basic training, right? And so he did basic training in airborne, and he's like,
you couldn't pay me enough.
But the standards had dropped so much. He's like, it was here, and then they've dropped the standards because at one point, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I had heard that at least the Army got rid of the grenade throwing qualifications because too many of the recruits couldn't safely get the grenade away from him. And I thought, well, this is good. This is Darwinism. We'll just fix this right here and now. If you can't throw a grenade far enough to not hurt yourself, goodbye.
It sounds like natural selection.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think we should ramp that up, actually.
Yeah.
Even schools, too.
Well, it's let's just get them back to exercising. I mean,
that at a bare minimum.
The kids of the 60s are a whole lot different than the kids today.
Yeah, we are much, much fatter, overweight, slower.
It's disgusting.
So you brought up tobacco use. People have slung around. I heard in the gym sauna the other day. You know how these conversations go, where people start talking about, and then somebody said, "I heard that nicotine increases testosterone," and I couldn't wrap my head around how that would be.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think it would do the exact opposite.
That's what I would think too.
You remember, so people are using some nicotine type gums and things of that nature, but that's more for cognition.
Yep.
The nicotinic receptors in the brain, so that nicotine releases more acetylcholine from the presynaptic synapse, and then that acetylcholine goes into either acetylcholine receptors or nicotinic receptors, and that's what creates, kind of that more vigilance type state, similar to caffeine in that state of awareness.
Yeah. Does it also cause vasoconstriction as well?
That's everything, right? So vasoconstriction. So people are like, it relaxes me. I'm always confused, and there's something to it, but physiologically, it doesn't relax you. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up. How is nicotine relaxing you?
Yeah, I can't figure that one out.
I can't square that circle either, right?
I've dabbled a time or two.
Yeah, I mean, prior military, right?
Yeah.
You're in that situation, right? Less so pronounced now, but now they have non-tobacco pouch dips. I can't think of the name of it.
Zyn.
Yeah, I know Sean Ryan's promoting one. He's all off the dip, and I'm like, God bless, do your thing.
It makes you feel a little anxious. And one benefit, I have used it during long cardio sessions, which I do once a year. It seems to make my runs go better, and I can't really explain why. Maybe the dopamine release that I do get from that tamps down the pain of cardio.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's the physiology. That's one we have to throw to Huberman.
Yeah,
right.
Sling it back to him.
Yeah.
Last thing I did want to cover is your position within Las Vegas PD S.W.A.T. And how does the treatment of let's call them the first responders, operators, and this can also apply to individuals in the military. How does the treatment of those individuals in that line of work differ from, let's say, just the average civilian?
Well, that one's tough to answer, and here's why. Because my position when I was volunteering with S.W.A.T. was as a tactical physician. So we would go out with the S.W.A.T. team as like a combat medic. In the event that so our first priority was officers and then civilians and the sort, right? So if something went sideways, somebody got hurt, we were there to provide definitive first aid care. That was that mission. Now, we weren't charged with the day-to-day health and wellness of the individual operators, officers. Most of that's they're left to their own device on that. But these guys are, like your tier 1 guys, right? So they are, dialed in with their exercise. A lot of them with diet, not all of them, right? Because and then if they're out on a long warrant or raid, what the department brings out to feed them,
MREs?
It's worse. It's freaking, it's In-N-Out or McDonald's or some nonsense like that. So my former colleague and partner who's also a tactical physician, is the same cosmetic surgeon who turned over the practice. I mean, we wrote up a whole program for the proper foods and hydration, considering the heat and keeping energy levels up, and we gave it to them, and I don't know whatever happened to that. It kind of fell on deaf ears. should probably look to find that again and re-implement something along those lines. But most of those guys take really good care of themselves with diet and exercise. But then there was a point in time that we had a handful of them that decided that hot yoga was the thing to do.
Okay.
Right? Oh, well, that's wonderful, except for you're getting dehydrated.
Oh, yeah.
And now you go out and it's July and you're on a 12-hour HRT. And you're already dehydrated, or they do some training. We actually had an officer crash one of the vehicles because he was so
just dizzy
from, and you're like, oh, geez, Fortunately, nobody got hurt, but, it happened, right? So we're like, no, you guys can do this stuff, but you have to hydrate, and you can't hydrate right before the mission. It's not a game you can play catch up with.
Yeah.
You have to stay on top of it. And so, like, I'm a big proponent now of, adding a lot of these salt. I use Element or something, get that magnesium, sodium, potassium. You can, out on something like that, they should be drinking 3-4 of these at a time. People are like, oh, my blood pressure. Salt's not going to hurt your blood pressure.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's going to probably lower it. You can, but if you get hyponatremic, not having enough sodium, that's deadly, right? So,
what other supplements do you typically recommend outside of Element T?
It just depends, right? I think the vast majority of people, and this runs the gamut across everybody, none of us eat enough fiber. We're supposed to get about 30 grams of fiber per day. One serving of fruits and vegetables has about 1 to 2 grams. Let's call it 2 grams.
Yeah.
So you're getting 2 grams of fiber. Are you eating 15 servings of fruits and vegetables per day? And you're healthy.
Me? No.
Do you see what I'm saying? So imagine what the
Not
average
even
person.
2. I'm probably majority of it is like eggs, bacon, salmon, red meat.
So you're not getting enough fiber. And so now when you start to look, so the fibers are probiotic, right? And when we talk about your gut flora, if you don't have enough probiotics, you're not feeding the healthy gut flora. And then, so you have your soluble fiber and your insoluble fiber. The insoluble fiber kind of forms like a matrix, like a web, right? Right? And then the soluble fiber goes in the middle of that, right? And kind of fills in the blanks. And now the bacteria come and they eat that. That's their fuel. And then they make anti-inflammatories like butane, not like the lighter fluid, but these things that keep inflammation down. And so gut inflammation is terrible. When you have inflammation in the gut, it transfers to the outside of the gut. And then the outside of the gut makes something called inflammasomes, which kind of sounds like now space type stuff, right? But these inflammasomes go to areas of inflammation in your body and crank up the volume. So if you've got an area that aches, let's say your knees bother you a little bit.
I'm 30
right?
now, so everything's starting to ache a little bit.
So go eat a pizza with gluten and dairy, cheese, and so there's a lot of inflammatory stuff in there. And see how you feel the next day. And if you pay attention to it, you'd be like, why am I sore? Well, I'm a little bit sore
I had
today.
a gallon of ranch with it too. It's probably
right.
why. Yeah.
But, so you can feel that, right?
Yeah.
And then when you get like me and you get real arthritis, because I'm a little, a few years older than you,
couple,
right?
Yeah.
Now when my wife says I feel like having a pizza, I'm like, okay.
It's a trade-off.
I know I'm going to have more inflammation. So we did that Friday, and I was yesterday with a physical therapist for 4 freaking hours. We had planned seeing him, but I was in such an inflamed state, and he's like, "Holy crap!" Like just working, doing all kinds of stuff. Now I feel great today because we ate clean, last night.
Yeah.
So we ate Mediterranean food. Right?
That's my favorite diet styles is Mediterranean.
So if you look at the Mediterranean diet, every study that's done on the Mediterranean diet, for the most part, shows benefit. You got to do what you're going to do. Yeah. But I think if you were to ask me to pick one, it's a Mediterranean diet. Why? Good, high in fats, healthy fats, olive oil, avocado, stuff like that. It's turned the food pyramid upside down, which is what we're supposed to do, right? Good protein. I'm a personal believer we need animal protein. If you're a vegan, good. You have to eat 50% more protein to get the same amount that I'm getting because of the lack of leucine if you're trying to maintain lean muscle. But you can do it, but you have to eat 50% more calories. So if I ate, 200 grams of protein, you have to eat 300, and that's an extra,
it's a lot of calories.
400 calories, right?
At least, yeah.
So And then it's focused on whole fruits and vegetables, mostly vegetables, right? With some fruits. So I'm a fan of more berries than anything else if you're going to eat fruits. So if you eat a diet like that, there's, in general, low inflammation because you're staying away from the grains. You're getting in a good amount of protein. You're getting in high, healthy fats, right? If you're getting enough of the fruits and vegetables, you're getting a sufficient amount or a decent amount of fiber. You probably still need to supplement with a little fiber. But man, now you're talking, right?
Yeah.
Real health. Nothing like an MRE.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
So what supplements do you take on a daily basis?
I take a multi,
Okay.
fish oil.
Okay. Creatine?
I do. I take anywhere between, and it just depends on the day. I just do, the day I train, about 20 grams.
Yeah.
And the days I don't train, 0. Or sometimes I'll throw a little in my coffee. I use a collagen protein, not for any protein benefit, but I have a collagen that has Mobility collagen, which is a specific manufacturer of it that's very, very fine milled. So it's micronized and it absorbs better. And they've got studies on it that's showing improvement in cartilage growth.
Okay.
So with my arthritis, I just do anything I can to try to help a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen the literature go back and forth on the efficacy of collagen over the years.
You have to look at the micronization of it. I fully believe. So if you look at Mobilee, and it's Mobilee, I believe
Is
it is.
that brand name or?
Yeah, so that's like the manufacturer,
Okay.
and then they delve out to particular people. It's a little bit more expensive.
Okay.
But yeah, I just take that. What else? I take DHEA and pregnenolone because I'm a full believer that when you take testosterone, if you don't backfill the precursor hormones, you're not getting the full benefit of it. So I take DHEA and pregnenolone to backfill them, and it really drives a better free testosterone. And our subjective experience from testosterone replacement is all based off of free testosterone. Nobody cares about the total.
Does DHEA have any sort of impact on hair?
I mean, theoretically it could because it improves, if it's going to improve testosterone, then it can increase dihydrotestosterone. But I think dihydrotestosterone has been unfairly blamed for male pattern baldness. When do men typically lose their hair? When they're in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
It starts in their 30s and 40s. And when do testosterone levels start to drop? At that same time. So we're seeing, so you're blaming something that's probably already low. It may have a role, but I don't think it's the be-all, end-all. I think a lot of it has to do with it. Basically, it's all about blood flow.
Okay.
Each hair follicle has its own unique blood flow. Anything that causes inflammation to that hair follicle, you think if some of these blood vessels they're capillary beds to where they're so small that a red blood cell has to fold to get through it to deliver oxygen. Any inflammation is going to choke it off. So it's just like somebody puts put you in a rear naked. If they hold it long enough, you'll be dead. But if you just pass out and they let go, you'll come back to life. And you can do that with hair follicles. Once they're dead and gone, they're gone. But if they're in a villous state, which is kind of like right before death, but they're just been kind of almost like being cryopreserved. If you can get blood flow back to them, they will come back and grow. So dihydrotestosterone, I think, is just unfairly. Because high cholesterol can do it, high blood sugars. I mean, you start thinking about if that blood cell has to fold to get through and it has a high sugar coating on it, it's going to leave some of that sugar coating in the inside lining of that vessel. Now the next blood cell ain't going to be able to get through.
Okay.
Right? So multifactorial.
Okay.
Right? And then the other thing is if you have a genetic predisposition for it. So I do. If you're genetically prone to it, you're probably going to lose your hair. You could do everything right and still probably going to lose it unless you're doing hair transplants and things of that nature, right?
Last question I got for you.
Shoot.
So it's called the operator curse. I don't know if you've ever heard about this before. And there's some other curses that people put a label on it, but it's this phenomenon where, and I think professional athletes have it as well, but you only have female offsprings. Is there any sort of reason why you see that a lot in the Tier 1 units of the military at high levels of professional athletes? Is there any science to that?
I don't think there's any science to it. So
Okay.
when you proposed that to me and you sent me the questions, I was like, this is really interesting. I've never heard of this before. So I looked it up and I couldn't find anything on it. So it just left me to contemplate, right? And here's my thought on it. And it's just my own goofy thought, right? I have no science to validate this,
Okay.
but it's something I've believed.
Okay.
So, I've always said because of the way I was an athlete and, paratrooper and all of this stuff, right? And I said, when I have a child, it's going to be a female. And the reason is because of the way I've treated women my entire life. And this is the universe to go, okay, because some asshole like you is going to come knocking on the door. And then you have to live like these girls' fathers had to live, right? And that's just it's to me, it's a karma. It's a universe kind of giving back. That's the way I look at it.
Okay.
If you were a shithead to the women that you dated, and then you're probably going to have daughters just, and the more of a shithead you were, the worse it's going to be, right?
Do you have all daughters?
I have a daughter. She is not biologically mine, but couldn't be any more mine, right? Yep. And then I just got married, less than 2 months ago. And so
Congratulations.
I have another daughter and a son. So, so I don't put,
so now you're
I don't
going
put,
through the ringer.
Yeah, but they're older. So, my oldest daughter now is 28. The youngest is 21, and now my son is 18. So I didn't have to change any diapers for any of these kids and do any of that stuff. But my new wife is like, well, maybe we should have one. I'm like, all right, well, if we're going to do it, we better get hot on it. So.
I recently had a colleague who he just found out that he's going to have a male child, and he was worried about this same curse. And what he said, again, verify that this is true or not, he's like, you have to make sure that you only have sex on the day of ovulation because male sperm have a shorter lifespan or something like that, where female sperm can live long. Is there any truth to that?
I don't do fertility medicine.
Okay,
I can't see any validity to that. but to that point, though, I mean, you can't make up. Life is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, it worked for him.
So, yeah, but just remember this. It's like saying, well, I flipped the coin and I warmed it up, and so it came up heads. So, therefore, every time I warm up the coin, it's going to come up heads. Yeah, no, it's still a 50-50 shot. Yeah. And the male is in control because we're the only ones who can give that Y chromosome.
That's right.
Right? So...
No pressure.
Zero. Yeah, you just, basically shoot your shot.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Well, hey, thanks, John, a lot for coming in today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I probably could have talked to you for 2 more hours about this.
We could do another one.
Yeah.
If you want to bring up some other subjects, as you can tell, this isn't work. This is passion. I love doing this stuff, and so I'd be happy to chat with you.
Do you care to shout out your practice?
Sure. Thank you. Practice is called Ageless Forever, AGELESS Forever, FOREVER. You can find us at agelessforever.net. You can call the office at 702-838-1994, or you can reach us through our website at agelessforever.net as well.
You guys got a pretty successful podcast as well.
Yeah, My Coffee with Doc. So we've done 21 episodes. It's been a blast, and we're trying to continue to find new and interesting subjects to talk about. Yeah. I want to get to a point where I'm kind of doing what you're doing, interviewing a couple people here and there. Yeah. It takes a real talent, and I don't know that I have that talent.
I think you do. You're a great speaker.
Yeah, because I can answer the questions, but can I think of the questions? And that's the hard part, I think.
ChatGPT, that can help.
There you go. Okay. All right, so you've given your secret away.
You know what? I actually was going to start with that, but then once I started reading your bio and everything, I was like, man, I just want to ask him about all these different things. I don't need ChatGPT. Yeah. So that was all from my brain. So,
okay, good. Yeah. Very good.
All right. Well, thank you, John.
I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Ciao.